The member for Sudbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to rise today to present the following motion, that in the opinion of the House, the Government of Ontario should replace gendered terminology with gender-neutral and inclusive language in all government forms as they are updated, amended, created, or replaced in order to reflect the diverse nature of our province, including but not limited to replacing the terms mother or father with terms such as parent or guardian to better recognize the rights of LGBTQ parents and others, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the language that is used on government forms is not something most people think about on a day-to-day basis, but it was first brought to my attention by a constituent of mine when she was trying to enroll her child in school. As a single mother, she had noticed that when she was filling out the school's enrollment forms, they had a space for mother and had a space for father. But she wasn't the last person to speak to me about this issue, especially here today, Mr. Speaker. Thinking about it, I know that I'm very fortunate. I have an incredible wife and two amazing daughters, so for me, and like a lot of other parents like me, filling out this form would be an innocuous occurrence. You'd write your name on one line and your spouse's or partner's name in another, and then that would be it. But for my constituent, it was a reminder that she was a single parent, and that being a single parent makes her feel different. It's a reminder to single parents, to divorced parents, or queer or transgendered parents that they and the way they are raising their child is not what is considered to be normal. But it is, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that was okay.
It was the Prime Minister Trudeau who said that tax has nothing to do with work in this chamber.
And that's a principle that I hold strongly, Mr. Speaker. That it's not the government's place to define a particular relationship or a particular identity as normal. Instead, the government should use language that is inclusive and that recognizes Ontario's diversity. Mr. Speaker, my staff and I reviewed the Ontario government's central form repository, met with stakeholders, and spoke to government ministries about this motion. And we found that there are already a number of forms that are consistent with the spirit of this motion and used gender-neutral language. For instance, OSAP registration forms request information on Parent 1 and Parent 2, and several others use the phrase parent or guardian. So, Speaker, it certainly is possible for government forms to use gender-neutral language, but there remains a number of examples of government forms to which this motion would apply. I've already mentioned school registration forms as an example, Mr. Speaker. For instance, the form to apply for a child's name change asks for detail about who the child's father is and who the child's mother is. And when someone consents to give their child up for adoption and fills out the acknowledgement of adoption placement forms, they have to identify whether or not the mother and father have consented to allow their child to be adopted. In these cases, Mr. Speaker, the government could ask for the parent's information or be more specific to ask for the biological parent's information instead, if need be. It would provide the government with the same information that the form currently has, but using terminology, Mr. Speaker, that is more relevant to the diversity that exists in today's society. Under the status quo, people can cross out terms like mother and father and write in what they would prefer to be used, but requires them to self-identify to the government as being different from the norm, Mr. Speaker. And to be clear, this motion isn't about saying that using terms that indicate a gender, such as mother or father, are bad or offensive in some way, just that in today's society, they aren't always as relevant reflection of the realities of Ontario's families, and that more appropriate terminology ought to be used. Mr. Speaker, I need to make this clear. This isn't about banning the words mother and father that was mentioned by some members of the press gallery earlier this afternoon. This is about making Ontario more inclusive. So, Speaker, the Government of Ontario currently uses more than 10,000 forms, and that the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services is the current caretaker of all government forms. We realize that for the government to undergo a full inventory of all forms, to take stock of forms which use gendered language, and to see which would need updating would place a significant burden on that specific ministry. Therefore, in the motion I have placed before the legislature, I have asked for the government to do this on a go-forward basis, as forms get updated, amended, created, or replaced, so as to avoiding placing an undue burden on ministry resources. As well, I think it is important to recognize that the common wisdom on what the best practices are in terms of inclusivity in language is changing rapidly. So in the motion, Mr. Speaker, that I have put before the House today, I have left what it means to use inclusive language to be open-ended, so that in the future, the government can use language that reflects the best practices that exist when a given form gets created or changed. So while this motion may be beneficial to many people in varying family situations, such as single-parent families and divorced parents, I want to use my remaining time to speak to what this means in particular for families with LGBTQ parents. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, Ontario has made great strides towards achieving legal equality in society between all peoples. Canada's first Gay Rights March took place in Ontario and Ottawa in 1971. It was Ontario Human Rights Commission in 1993 Waterman versus National Life decision that was first to recognize that employers could not discriminate based on sexual orientation. It was Ontario that was the first province to allow same-sex couples to adopt in 1995. And on May 10, 2002, it was an Ontario judge who ordered that Mark Hall could bring a same-sex date to his prom. On July 12, 2002, it was the Ontario Superior Court that ruled that banning same-sex marriage violated the equality provisions of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And it was on July 19, 2012, that Toby's Act received royal assent, banning discrimination based on gender identity and expression. But there is still far more progress to be made in terms of achieving real social equality for LGBTQ people in Ontario. In recent years, Mr. Speaker, there have been some positive steps made. As of 2005, 2 same-sex parents can be listed on a child's birth certificate. As of 2012, with the passage of the Accepting Schools Act, school boards couldn't prevent the creation of gay-straight alliances. And as of earlier this year, with the passage of Bill 77, gay and trans conversion therapy for minors has been banned, and I want to applaud the work from the member from Parkdale High Park on that. I was very happy to vote in favour of that bill, and so is this government. But in speaking with my constituents at Ferte Sudbury Pride parades in past years, and I was unfortunate that I couldn't attend this year with the passing of my father, and then from meetings with organizations like TG and ourselves in the riding of Sudbury, my great riding of Sudbury, there is far more progress that we need to make, Mr. Speaker. And I realize that changing the language on government forms may seem like a small step, but it is a small step in the right direction, Mr. Speaker. But it means this government is doing more than just saying it's legal to be LGBTQ or legal to be a single parent, or that people ought not treat someone differently because their identity is different or their situation may be different. It means that the government is actively recognizing that no matter the makeup of your identity or your family, you and your family are just as much a part of the rich mosaic that is Ontario. Speaker, I am very proud to have put forward this motion, as I feel this represents another step forward towards the one Ontario, where everyone is treated with respect, regardless of their identity, that I want to see for this province, for my constituents in Sudbury, for the people of Ontario, and most importantly for my daughters, Mr. Speaker, so all our families can grow in an Ontario that respects all, Mr. Speaker. Now, as I know I need to start to conclude, Mr. Speaker, as my time is running out, I first want to acknowledge Susan Gapka, who's here in the gallery. Susan and I have, yes, a well-deserved round of applause. Susan and I have worked together for, I would say, five, 6 years in both my elected capacities on the Hill in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker, and here at Queen's Park. And truly, if there is an advocate for making sure that politicians learn and grow, Susan has been able to help us do that. And I'm very honored today that Susan was able to make it here to hear this, my speech, because I was able to learn a lot from Susan. And if she continues to do the great work that she's doing with all of us here and with all the great work that she's doing across the country, I think we'll see more and more of these motions directing governments to do what's right. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge it's been 22 years now since I lost my oldest brother to AIDS. And I know right now that he's looking down on me, smiling, because I've learned some very good lessons from him that I'm able to take forward to ensure that we're creating an Ontario that he would be proud of, that we can all be proud of, and that we continue to strive to make sure that everyone is included, everyone is respected, and everyone is part of this great province that we all live in. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the ongoing debate that we will have here on my motion today. I do hope that everyone will continue, will look at supporting this, because I do think this will bring us forward in the right way. So with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the time, and I was honored to speak today. Thank you.